I'm here with Jim, and he's kindly agreed to speak about his move to Valencia. So if you're thinking of coming here to live in Valencia, this could be really helpful and interesting for you, especially if you're coming up to retirement or you're retired already. So I've written a few questions down. If you have any questions about retiring in Valencia or Spain in general, contact me through LinkedIn. Okay, we're in Valencia, which is kind of hometown to fresh oranges. It's funny how life comes around. I remember years ago being in England with my grandma in the kitchen, making orange jam with her, and she always said, Tanya, if you make jam, you have to make it with Valencia oranges. And here we are. Here's to my abuela. Let me introduce you to Jim. Thanks so much, Jim, for coming along today. She's going to put another table here, which is really nice. Just perfecto, gracias. So, Jim, how come you came to Valencia? People do leave their home country and decide to go somewhere. It sounds an easy thing to do in a way, but actually making that decision, I don't think is so easy. So I'd love to hear about how you came to this decision.
Yeah, it's kind of a long story. I had a very long career in California working at the DC Commerce. I was an editor for DC Commerce for 18 years. We worked with a lot of Spanish talent. There were a number of terrific Spanish comic artists. Then I started to get invited to trade shows.
Trade shows in Spain?
Initially Barcelona and then Madrid. The purpose was to meet with the people we were working with. I would also meet with young aspiring Spanish artists who wanted to break into the American hobbits. I did that off and on for about 10 years. I started to like the country a lot. I went to Asturias a few times, which I loved. I kind of was to coming to Spain and felt very comfortable here. Really liked the culture, really liked the planning. And then lockdown came. I thought, that's it, I'm never going to travel again. And I kept stumbling upon these videos with people who, obviously, before the pandemic, had moved to Spain. They kept talking about how they did it. And it was sort of like a vague fantasy in the back of my mind. This is
got excited about it.
Again, I didn't know when we were going to get out of lockdown. But I started doing my research, and it was 2021. Vaccines came along, they would travel back into Spain, getting the COVID test and all that. And my first time back in, I was in Asturias, it was in this festival that I loved and going to do this. I went back to my job.
It was that fast.
Yeah, and plus, I was getting older. Sooner or later, then I'd have to retire. Where is that going to be? So I went back to Real-Arcus, and I told my boss, well, here's the plan. And it set everything in motion. Then it was like, okay, now I've got to do this.
When you spoke it out loud, it became always the reality. It was not just a dream.
Exactly.
And you told somebody else as well. So yeah,
I told many people. And I told my Spanish friends about it too. By early 2023, paperwork was in motion, and I was already starting to do everything I had to do.
Yeah. See, when you say paperwork, this is for you to come and retire from the US. And what year was it?
I really started the whole process in early 2023.
2023, okay. And so was that a tricky process? If anybody else is coming from the US, how would you step them through?
Well, I decided to hire a lawyer because I just don't have the patience with bureaucracy. I don't have the patience with paperwork. I don't feel like I'm smart enough to figure this stuff out. So I think from posting all these things online, I started to get hit with these ads. I saw this one company got a referral and somebody so I connected with this company that specialized in relocating people to Spain. So it was money well spent as far as I was concerned, because they held my hand through the entire process, walking through the steps, told me everything I had to do, made all the appointments. So I was able to do everything in this instance.
The process is you have to do some of the legwork while you're in the US.
Exactly.
And what are the key documents?
Well, the first thing you have to decide is what kind of visa they're filling in. And in my case, I applied for the non-lucrative visa based on the retired. Now, to qualify for that, you have to prove you have some sort of passive income that's coming, even though you're not permitted to. You have to demonstrate you have a certain amount of earnings available, that you're able to be self-sufficient.
They wanted to see your bank statement. And did it have to go back fully?
Not really. It was just a few years. Tax returns. And I also needed a letter from my employer saying, yes, he is retiring. Yes, he'll no longer be working for us. The trickiest part was getting fingerprinted. I had to go through the FBI in the States and have them fingerprint me so that they could be sure I wasn't coming here with a criminal record. What was funny about that is I discovered that as you get older, it's harder to leave a fingerprint.
It's harder to what?
Leave a fingerprint.
Okay.
They're more difficult to reuse. The older we get, and our state needs to dry out. I didn't know that either.
That is a great retirement tip. If you haven't actually got to retirement yet, you need to actually buy special moisturizer for your fingertips because you want to make sure you can actually give your print when you retire. Well, when you apply to come to Spain. That's hilarious. I've never heard of that. Maybe they're going to make special cream in the future for retirees to lubricate their fingertips.
I found that they can only attempt so many times and then you're done. You tried like 5 times.
I've never heard of this. So you're saying there's a guy or a woman in the States who has a mobile and comes to your house and takes your fingertips.
Digitally takes your fingerprints and then files them with your card. So then you get a document back that says yes and spying. The other part of dealing with the lawyers is they also did all the translation because every document that I submitted, they translated. They got my appointments. The Spanish consulate in Los Angeles where I was living. That can take a lot of time to get that. I had all the documents, I had the paperwork ready, and everything I needed.
The whole package. From the start of that conversation you had with this company, how long did it take from that initial conversation to get the appointments in the US embassy?
I want to say the whole process took me about 6 months.
6 months.
I'm not sure if that's normal, but that's how long it took me because there were a lot of stops and starts along the way.
Well, give yourself time. So that's a great team, actually.
Yeah. Well, what was funny about that, so I turned in all my documents in the consulate in Los Angeles, and everybody told me, like, it's going to be at least a month for the here property. I went in on a Monday, and the following Monday, I got an email that said, come get your visa. It's 1 week. What I understand, it varies by region. In other words, each autonomous region of Spain has a different process, a different time frame. I was applying through Valencia, and they turned it around in 1 week, which sounds great, except then I was in panic because for the moment you get your visa, you have 90 days to get here.
Okay.
Here's told me, get the money order for $630.
For the processing in the U.S.
So I paid in all the paperwork. The paperwork's approved. The woman said, okay, now I want the payment. I handed the money order. She looks at it and goes, why is this so much money? I said, well, this is what my lawyers told me. She said, it's $130. And I said, what kind of payment do you take? She said, well, only money order or cash. And I said, is there a cash machine here? And she said, well, there's a 7-Eleven, which is convenience store down the street. So I leave the Spanish consulate. I run 2 blocks in Los Angeles down to this convenience store, withdraw the cash, run back to the consulate, and then paid her the money. Unfortunately, I was able to get a refund on that $630 money order. But I went back to my lawyers and I said, it's all good, but what about this? And they sent me a screenshot of the requirement on the website of the consulate. But sure enough, it said,
you made the mistake.
One of the things I've heard is that the consulates sometimes can be very arbitrary and the rules change unpredictably. And in fact, even in the States, like what was required at Los Angeles may not have been what was required at San Francisco. And sometimes it depends on who the agent is. And what was really funny in my case, I had 2 of the documents on their way. They were in FedEx. I was able to show her 2 PDFs. And she said, bring the real ones with you.
She sounds great.
Which sometimes they won't say that. They'll just find it until a week later. I had one of these.
What does it look like when you get it?
Oh, it's stamped into my passport. So it's part of my passport.
Okay, and it does expire?
It does. It's like 90 days from the day.
Because you've been here longer than 90 days.
Right.
How long have you been here now?
A year and a half. I have to go register the police. There's a document in the end. I had to do it through the police.
Did they ask you for residence, like where you're living as well?
Yes.
So you needed that fee?
Yeah. I'm told sometimes it could be a little confusing because you take a residence and take out the VA, but you pay with the VA until you have the residence. I was going to use my friend's address, but I was able to get the apartment just on my passport.
Okay.
And then once I had that, then I had to go to the town hall and get the padrone, which is the proof that I have a place to live.
Right.
And then the padrone comes with me to the police, with the visa, your passport, and then it takes like a month to get to me after you've had your appointment.
So it takes 1 month after you go to the police station with your
padrone and the visa, because they give you the NIA.
That's why you're going to the police station to get your NIA number, and you need your padrone and your visa, you're paying
like the fingerprints.
So you presented it to the police months, and then that took
a month. It was exactly what they told me. They said it'll be ready in a month.
Yeah.
It was ready. This past year, I had the initial non-lucrative visas, so I had to renew it at the end of last year, and now it's good for 2 more years.
Was that an issue? Did they make lots of checks for the renewal?
The renewal was stressful for me than the initial visa. My lawyers had started the process, so we were a couple of months into it, and then suddenly they were asking me for more information. I said, why? I said, Valencia has just changed the rules. So they were really getting strict about my financial leasing.
They wanted more proof to do with your financial status,
Exactly.
But you'd already given tax
My
returns
retirement
and all that.
fund. The first year, there's a certain dollar-euro requirement you have to have, and then so the year 2 and 3, it's doubled.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you need maybe 30,000 a year, the next year you must show that you're earning 60,000.
Or that you have
60,000 saving.
my monthly income is my American Social Security, which is not enough to live on in the States, but it's enough to live on.
So, what I'm understanding, when you're coming from the US, you will come with Social Security money, and that will vary depending on what your earnings have been. So, therefore, you can say in general what people need to think about when they come here in Valencia. How much do they need to live comfortably? I'm thinking food, and I'm also thinking rental, because I think most people come here not to buy. The US people and the UK people, some buy, some do buy, yeah, it's true. But say for a rental, because if you're going to buy, it makes sense to rent to begin with anyway.
Right.
So in a pretty good area.
I'm gathering that you live pretty much in the centre.
A little bit south of the center.
Okay, but you're not up a mountain kind of thing. You are in the centre.
Like, I could walk to the center.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And it was one of the big incentives to come to Valencia because it's a very walkable city. I love to have the exercise. I didn't want to have a car. I came from Los Angeles where a car was mandatory and also very expensive. For 2 reasons, I decided it would be nice to live in a city where I can walk everywhere. Valencia also has a terrific metro system, and just not having the expense of owning a car, but also the required physical activity of having to walk for the So regarding the cost of living, it's really interesting because when I started doing my research, Valencia was just starting to become a very popular. It was becoming more and more popular. I think the cost here, even in the short time I've been here, have risen quite a bit. So when I started doing my research back in 2023, I would see things online where people would say, oh, a couple can live here comfortably for 3,000 euro. I don't think that's quite true. Because rents, for one thing, have increased quite a bit.
So from 2023, you feel like there's people who live here for 3,000, but now you feel...
I don't believe so. And I just wanted to think on your lifestyle. Now, for me, I don't live an extravagant lifestyle. I feel I live a fairly comfortable lifestyle. But my expenses per month are maybe between 2,200, 2,500 euro a month, including my rent, utilities, groceries, and continuing dining. But that's not living extravagant.
You're in a lovely apartment and you're in the centre, everything's convenient, so it's a certain standard. And for that, you have pay. Can I ask you how much you pay for your rent? Do you mind?
I'll tell you. Right now, I'm paying 1,000 euro a month for a 2-bedroom apartment.
That's excellent. 1,000.
1,000. Which, in hindsight, I was very fortunate. I was very lucky because I think nowadays to look for an apartment that's comparable to mine, even some of the one-bedrooms are going for 1,200, 1,300.
I think you've got a very good deal there. Has it got a balcony?
No, it doesn't.
It doesn't have a balcony. Does it have a lift?
It does have a lift.
Okay, and what floor is it on?
I am on the 3rd.
Well, it has a lift, and it's pretty central.
I'm very close to the City of Arts and Sciences. My neighborhood is more residential. It's more older Spanish. There aren't really a lot of expats in my neighborhood, not too many. Most of the people who live there are kind of like maybe Spanish, and a lot of families you see in my neighborhood their whole lives. So I like that about it. It's very quiet, but it's very easy for me to get to the more popular neighborhoods.
So it's very much a Spanish neighborhood.
Very unusual for me to hear English, as opposed to when you're in the center of the city here in Valencia, you're going to hear every language on earth spoken.
And how did you find the apartment? Did you go through an estate agent?
I ended up with an agent, a friend who was living there already, an English friend of mine. The 3 of us sat in a coffee shop and just went through Idea listing and looked at listings and wrote them down. And if there was a phone number to call, we would hand the phone to my friend Aitana, who speaks Spanish, of course.
Fantastic.
And she was setting up all the appointments. And then She and I went around and looked at about 6 different places.
You went to 6 different apartments in different areas. Yeah. And then you came across this one.
Yeah. And this, coincidentally, was my favorite.
Okay.
And it was also the first one that accepted my offer.
So does that mean that you got rejected?
I did get rejected. Yeah.
Did they give a reason?
Sometimes they were renting to somebody else. Sometimes there was no reason given. The agent told me. She was a very pleasant agent. She was bilingual, spoke English and Spanish. She told me there's somebody else who they're considering for the apartment, and I think they wanted a 1-month deposit. And I said, I'll give you 2 months.
Very clever.
And I closed the deal.
Okay, that's very smart. That's actually a great tip then. That really is a great tip. So there's a lot of competition when you're looking for an apartment here in Valencia or other places in Spain as well. So as Jim did, put a healthy deposit down. If they ask for 1 month, if you really love the apartment, you don't want to lose it, well then you could offer 2 months deposit and that might swing it for you. Because if you find something that you really love, you really want to move on it quickly. In Jim's case, he was lucky because he had friends to help him find this wonderful apartment, and he had a Spanish friend to make the calls. But often what happens here is that people go with a estate agent. Some are great and some less good, as with any place. And often what you have to do is pay a finder's fee. So you say what you're looking for and they'll make a selection for you, and if you sign, well then you pay a certain amount of money on top of the deposit. So that's often how it works. And of course, if you want more information on that, please connect with me on LinkedIn and we can have that conversation.
I was asking Jim about how easy it was to make friends here, because that's the issue. People leave the home country and come to a new country. How does that work?
Oh, yeah. I was lucky to have friends here, or I had friends back in the States who knew people there already. So I was able to be in touch with them. And so then I also started going to meetups, which is a kind of a worldwide organization. They have chapters in almost every city, and they may be very subject specific, but generally the ones I'm going to are just the people gathering at bars. It's a great opportunity to meet people, not only locals, but a diverse range of people from all over. So I've been meeting people all around the world.
That's fantastic. You were able to do that. Now, was it always that smooth, or did you ever hit a bump in the road where it wasn't so easy, or a particular time where you started to doubt yourself?
The biggest doubt for me, the biggest struggle for me, whether it's something everybody should prepare for, has been the language. After a year and a half, I'm still learning. I'm still a little bit frustrated with my level of progress. So that can be challenging. Now, do you meet a lot of people who can speak English? Yes. If you're in the center of the city, most shops you go to, you will easily find somebody who speaks English, but I'm not interested in just sort of isolating to an English-speaking community. I'd like to assimilate. And of course, it's absolutely essential for some things you have to do here. So I always say the difference is you can visit a foreign country and not speak the language as a tourist fairly easily. But when it comes to things like doctor's appointments, or someone has to come to repair something in your flat, now the conversation could be very technical. So that can be challenging. To getting slightly better, I have to say my Spanish friends are extremely potent. Sometimes you'll see stories online, well, simply not by the family. That has not been my experience. I found most people very kind.
You can enroll in different Spanish classes here. There's several schools. The only thing is the age group is very young. So sometimes the conversations we want to have are a little bit different than with somebody who's in their 20s, right? As Jim said, it's good to be at least a little motivated to learn the language.
I've been in a number of situations in a social setting where it's a lot of Spanish people together with them to speak in their own language. Yes. And many times I feel isolated.
It's a bit frustrating when you feel you've got something to contribute, and actually what you're contributing is at the age level of a 7-year-old. Something else I really want to ask is if you could describe your typical day as a retiree in Spain, in Valencia, how would that look?
I don't know if my day is typical of anybody else's. One of the great things about living here and not having a car, in the States, I would do like a weekly trip and load up my car. Now I have to go grocery shopping maybe 2-3 times a week, which is great because it gets exercise, it gets pound. So there's that. Right now, I'm in the midst of a whole bunch of things that are coming up all at once. I have to get contact file for my tax identification number.
How expensive.
Yes. Oh, I just went to have blood work done the other day because I'm doing my annual physical checkup.
That's a good point, actually. Insurance, that's something everybody asks about. Who do you use and how much do you pay? And how does it compare to the States?
Coming here on a visa, in my case, it's a non-lucrative visa, you are absolutely required to have private health insurance. My law firm that I work with, they prepared all of that for me. Multiple companies do private health insurance. I went with a company that my agent recommended and who approved me. What you pay for it varies by your age, of course. Let's say you come over here in your 30s. You might be spending 600 euros a year for your insurance. My case, it's a little over 2,000.
So when you say 2,000, that's full cover.
A year.
For a year. To get residency and to get your visa, you must have insurance, and it has to be a complete insurance.
My case, I'm paying little over 2,000 euro a year. Then it's renewable every year. I understand after you're here for a year, you then are eligible to apply the public health insurance, which I haven't done yet, but I'm going to. But right now, I'm really on the second year of my private health insurance. Again, 2,000. They sound like a lot.
I'm curious about that. So if you're in the US, how much insurance would you be paying a year or a month?
Don't get me started on U.S. healthcare. It would depend on the level of coverage you'd want. Basic, like Medicare, which is something I still pay into, but that really does very little for you. It's something you really only use in an absolute emergency, but you might still get hit. Astronomical medical bills, even with your coverage. It's a problem for everyone. Even with health insurance in the United States, you might be billed for other services. Now, here, does private health insurance cover everything? No, it doesn't. So I'll give you an example. Last year, I decided to see a cardiologist too. I had the most thorough heart examination I've ever had in my life. And at the end, they said, well, sorry, but your insurance isn't covering us. So how much? They said 100 euro. I said, okay. That would have been literally in the States, that would have been tens of thousands. To go to my dentist, which I'm doing next week, for me to get a cleaning, it cost me like 60 euro. So again, medical insurance, absolutely required. You can't obtain a visa without it. A lot of people, myself included, not a provider who speaks English. Went to a health insurance company's website to find a doctor visited. And when I got there, not so much. But we have this kind of humorous relationship where every time I go there, his English is a little bit better than my Spanish. Funny thing about being retired is I wonder, where did I have time to do anything when I was working? When you're working full time, you have those little precious hours to steal away. Now, I'm not working, and yet the days just fly by. It's like I've done two things, and at 6 o'clock, I have most of my meals at home. And if I go to eat out, it's generally social with a friend and a friend is to have a meal outside. Sometimes in the museum, usually a couple of days during the week, I'm meeting up with some friends. I write, I draw, I'm building my own website. So I have a lot of things, which is great because I have a 2-bedroom apartment. One room was almost set up as an office. So I have my separate office. And I find myself a lot of time in front of the computer, which I try to do too much. Remind myself to get out, get some fresh air, to walk. Always making sure I'm physically active every day. I'm walking somewhere every day.
Do you feel healthier here than perhaps when in the US?
Yes,
In
for
what
sure.
way?
I'm more mobile. The quality of the food here is so healthy. There are many restrictions here on things that people eat regularly in the States that are not even allowed here. Food with the preservatives, hormones, or whatever. It just feels like the food here is more natural. It's healthier. Sometimes I find I have to shop more frequently because they don't have preservatives. They will perish more quickly. So I have to replace them, but I consider that a tip. I try to maintain a healthy diet here, which is easy to do. Between the weather, the walking, social life, and the food, I generally feel like it's a much healthier and less stressful. Not having a car really helps too, because that was always very stressful. Especially living in a city like Los Angeles, you really can't drive anywhere without being stressed out. Just do your full work, spend as much time as you need to get it done. Make sure you have your financial house in order and you're prepared for all the expenses. I follow a lot of expat Facebook groups, and sometimes I'm kind of shocked at the naive questions people are asking. They say, I'm moving to Spain next month. How does this work? You should know that before you get here. Key piece of advice, visit the place before you think about living. Get a feel for it before you make a big commitment to just pick up your whole life and live someplace that you've never lived.
I think that's very key, actually, before you make that commitment to live here, to visit. And what would you suggest? People come for how long just to get a real feel? How long did you do that? Or if you were going to do that again, would you say to come for a month or 2 months or what? Any idea?
I think in an ideal situation, I would have come maybe a month. I had a lot of experience visiting Spain for short trips, like a week at a time here and there. So I had some feel for it. Valencia was a little bit impulsive. I'd only been here for 2 days before I made the decision to come here. But I felt like I was familiar enough with Spain to weigh it against my other experiences. It's not something you can know in a short weekend trip. You really, really want to have sufficient time to familiarize yourself.
Likewise, maybe dive in, but put your toe in the water first.
Yes, I fully support a leap of faith. Only if that leap of faith is backed up by sufficient research.
A lot of people might say you can do it yourself, or the documentation, and find your way forward without financial or legal guidance. And yeah, in some ways that's true, you can, but do you really want to do that? As Jim was mentioning then, it just made sense to throw a little bit of money out there to get somebody to coordinate everything. And they did it in a very efficient way, took away all that burden and all that stress. A lot of thanks so much, Jim, for joining me. We had a few lovely things to eat. What's wonderful is actually hearing your story, your journey, the real reality of what it's like, rather than just glossing over certain points that people really want to know about. You're actually living the dream. You made a very bold and very brave change, because it's not so easy. From what I can see, you really planned it very well. You were very organized. You did your own research, and then you found support to help you make this transition.